The Nature of Reality by Bandra. Welcome to Conversations That Awaken, a podcast where science, philosophy, psychology, mysticism, and direct experience come together to explore life's deepest questions. What is reality? Who are you beyond your thoughts, beliefs, and stories? Is consciousness merely a product of the brain, or is it the very foundation of existence itself? Join us as we journey beyond assumptions, challenge conventional thinking, and investigate the mysteries that have fascinated humanity for thousands of years. This is more than a conversation. It is an invitation to awaken to a deeper understanding of yourself, the universe, and the extraordinary reality we all share. Welcome to Conversations That Awaken.
Right now, inside your body, there are roughly 37 trillion cells.
Give or take a few billion, yeah.
Right. And they're all perfectly coordinating to keep you alive, like transporting nutrients, repairing your DNA, fighting off pathogens.
Firing electrical impulses constantly.
Exactly. And the craziest part is absolutely no one is in charge.
Nobody.
There is no biological CEO. Like, there's no little foreman in your brain managing the cellular logistics of your liver.
Right, which raises the big question.
Yeah. How do you exist? How does something so incomprehensibly complex operate flawlessly without, a central manager?
Well, the human mind really struggles with that reality.
Yeah.
I mean, we are so conditioned to assume that complexity requires a coordinator.
Oh, totally.
When we see an intricate system, our immediate, almost knee-jerk cognitive reflex is to look for the architect.
We are tackling what is arguably the most fundamental question humanity has ever, attempted to articulate.
Who created all this?
Right. Who created all this? And our foundational source today is a really fascinating document. It's titled Creation Without a Creator, The Self-Organizing Universe.
It's a heavy one. It forces a complete reevaluation of how we understand order and existence and, honestly, our own origins.
It really does. But before we get into the actual mechanics of the cosmos, I want to bring up Bandra right at the beginning.
Yeah, that's a very smart place to start.
Because it sets a really vital, grounded tone for the terrain we are about to navigate.
Framing this discussion carefully is just essential, especially considering the historical and cultural weight of the question itself.
Yeah, we are stepping into some highly sensitive terrain here, and I want to speak directly to you, the listener, for a moment to establish exactly what this conversation is.
And what it is not.
Exactly. Because we recognize that for many people, religion is not merely a set of beliefs.
No, it's family, it's culture.
Right. Identity, memory, community, hope. It is literally the language you were given to make sense of life, death, suffering, and, well, the profound mystery of existence.
The frameworks we inherit, they shape the very architecture of our reality.
Which is why we really need to be explicit here. This is not an attack on religion.
Not at all.
It is not an attempt to mock anyone's faith or insult anyone's tradition.
Or to arrogantly declare that one group has the ultimate truth while everyone else is completely wrong.
Right. And we are certainly not here to violently tear down one set of ancient beliefs, only to, hand you a shiny new set of beliefs and expect you to blindly swallow them.
Because if we did that, what would we have actually accomplished?
Absolutely nothing. We would have simply changed the wallpaper inside the exact same psychological prison.
Substituting one unexamined dogma for another offers zero intellectual or spiritual utility.
Well said. So it is not about telling you what to believe. It is about asking a much deeper question.
Have you ever examined why you believe what you believe?
Exactly. Were your deepest beliefs actually discovered by you through your own experience and inquiry? Or were they handed to you?
By your parents, your culture?
Your religion, your teachers, your society. I mean, think about the geographical lottery of birth.
Oh, that's a huge point.
Right. If you had been born in another country, into an entirely different family, surrounded by a completely different tradition, would you be defending an entirely different version of the truth with the exact same absolute certainty?
That geographical and cultural contingency is exactly what the source text asks the reader to confront first. It really forces a wedge between what is universally true and what is merely culturally familiar.
So here's the central question behind this entire deep dive today. Have you ever been told the truth about reality? Or have you simply inherited a story about reality?
There's a massive difference.
A massive difference. And once you begin to see that difference, something extraordinary starts to happen.
You begin to question.
Yes. Not because questioning is some I don't know, act of rebellious defiance.
Right, but because questioning might be the very beginning of actual freedom.
So, we're going to explore concepts today that may challenge some of the deepest assumptions you have carried around since childhood. But please, and I mean this, do not believe me.
Acceptance without investigation is the complete antithesis of the scientific and philosophical methods we're covering today.
So examine it, question it, challenge the material. Look for yourself. This deep dive isn't for someone who wants another authority figure to just hand them the answers.
Right.
It is for those of you willing to ask, what do I actually know, and what have I merely been told?
And what if reality is far more mysterious, far more beautiful, and far more extraordinary than any story we've inherited?
Consider this an invitation, not an invitation to abandon your faith, but an invitation to examine everything.
Keep what survives your deepest, most honest inquiry. Let go of what does not.
Because awakening doesn't begin when someone hands you the final answer. Awakening begins when you finally have the courage to question the answers you were given.
That psychological unmooring is exactly where the source material begins its analysis. It looks at the cognitive root of why humans instinctively search for a creator in the first place.
Yeah, and the text calls this our blueprint bias, right?
Exactly, the blueprint bias, because human beings operate in a highly manufactured environment. We observe a very clear linear chain of causality in our daily lives.
Right, like a house exists because carpenters and architects built it.
A computer functions because hardware and software engineers designed it.
We only experience order as the byproduct of conscious human labor.
Yeah, and the mechanism at play here is our evolutionary pattern recognition system. Anthropologists and cognitive scientists often refer to the hyperactive agency detection device.
Or HADD, right?
Right, HADD. Basically, on the ancestral savanna, if early humans heard a rustle in the bushes, the ones who assumed it was a predator, an intentional agent, they survived.
They ran away.
Exactly. But the ones who assumed it was just the wind, a random non-intentional process, they were occasionally eaten.
Wow. So we actually evolved to project agency and intent and conscious design onto our environment because it was literally a survival advantage.
We are hardwired to look for the invisible person pulling the strings.
Which means we project our localized human experience of manufacturing onto the entire cosmos.
Yes. We look at the staggering complexity of the universe and apply the only logic we know: order equals an organizer.
You know, I was trying to visualize this limitation in our thinking, and the analogy that comes to mind is this. Imagine someone who has lived their entire life inside a factory.
Okay, a factory worker.
Yeah, they only know conveyor belts, assembly lines, supervisors. That's their whole world. One day, they walk out of the factory and onto a beach for the very first time.
Right.
They look down and see the sand perfectly rippled by the receding tide. These beautiful, mathematically precise waves stretching for miles. Operating strictly on factory logic, that person would have to assume that a giant with a massive rake came by in the middle of the night to organize the sand.
That's a perfect analogy. They invent the giant with the rake because their cognitive framework completely lacks the capacity to process order that generates itself.
Exactly.
The rippled sand is just a consequence of fluid dynamics, gravity, and the friction of water over silica. But to the factory worker, order requires an employee.
And our societies reinforce this factory logic continuously, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. The text expands on that societal conditioning quite a bit. We are entirely immersed in top-down hierarchical control structures.
Like governments and corporations?
The modern nation state, the corporate structure, educational systems, military organizations, they all operate on a centralized model.
Right. Information and directives flow downward from a singular point of authority.
And we are so saturated in this organizational methodology that the concept of decentralized, spontaneous order feels deeply counterintuitive to us.
We look at a galaxy and expect to find a cosmic board of directors.
Ex-
But the source material pivots here to show how nature actually operates when stripped of all those human assumptions. It introduces the mechanics of self-organization.
Self-organization is such a paradigm-shifting concept in physics, chemistry, and biology.
How does the text define it?
The formal scientific definition provided is order arising spontaneously from the local interactions of the components of an initially disordered system.
So no external boss.
Right. The key mechanism is that the organization is not directed by any external agent. It emerges entirely from internal dynamics.
And the snowflake is the classic example the text uses to illustrate this, which I love. Breaking down the actual physics of it is fascinating.
Because a snowflake exhibits perfect six-sided symmetry, it really looks engineered.
It does. Yet there is no microscopic blueprint.
No. The symmetry of a snowflake emerges strictly from thermodynamics and molecular geometry.
Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. So a water molecule consists of two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom, bonded at a specific angle of roughly 104.5 degrees.
104.5 degrees. Got it.
When water freezes in the atmosphere, those molecules link together, and because of that very specific angle, they naturally form a hexagonal lattice.
So the macro structure, like the beautiful six-sided star we see falling from the sky, is just a scaled-up reflection of the microstructure of the water molecule itself.
Yes. The environment acts as the sculptor. As this microscopic hexagonal ice crystal falls through the cloud, it encounters microscopic changes in temperature and humidity.
Right, it's falling through different zones.
And because all 6 corners of the crystal experience the exact same atmospheric conditions at the exact same time, they all grow branches simultaneously and identically.
That is so elegant. The underlying physical laws dictate the complexity. No external designer is necessary at all. The parameters of physics and chemistry just do all the heavy lifting.
Exactly.
Let's scale that mechanism up, though, because chemistry is one thing, but biology introduces a level of complexity that makes a snowflake look like, a child's toy.
It really does.
The text moves from the snowflake to the human embryo. And this is where the self-organization argument becomes incredibly dense. We are talking about a single fertilized egg-1 cell dividing into trillions of specialized cells.
Right. The biological transition from a zygote to a fully formed organism is called morphogenesis. And for centuries, scientists were completely baffled by how it happened without a master plan.
Because, as the source notes, there is no foreman inside the womb shouting instructions.
No project manager.
There's no microscopic project manager carrying a clipboard telling this cell over here to become a retina and that cell over there to become a femur.
The mechanism driving morphogenesis is entirely decentralized. The text highlights the concept of cellular automata and chemical gradients.
What's that mean in practice?
Well, cells don't have a map of the final human body. They only have local information.
Okay.
They secrete chemicals called morphogens. A cell determines what kind of tissue it should become based entirely on the concentration of these chemicals in its immediate localized environment, combined with the genetic code it carries.
So it's like a peer-to-peer network.
It is a vast, decentralized communication grid. If a cell senses a specific concentration of protein X and protein Y from its immediate neighbors, it triggers the expression of specific genes to become, say, a liver cell.
And if the concentration is slightly different, it becomes a skin cell.
Precisely. The overall form of the human body emerges from trillions of these localized microscopic interactions occurring simultaneously.
Which honestly makes the giant with the rake theory look absurdly inefficient.
How so?
Well, if a creator actually had to consciously micromanage the trajectory of every dividing cell in every pregnant mammal on the planet, the computational burden would be infinite.
It would be mathematically impossible.
Right. Self-organization is a vastly more elegant system because the intelligence is baked into the components themselves.
The distinction here is between order imposed from the outside versus order emerging from the inside.
Explain that a bit more.
Sure. Human engineering imposes order on passive materials. You force steel and glass into a skyscraper. They don't want to be a skyscraper.
Right, you have to weld them and bolt them.
But nature operates on active materials. The components themselves carry the rules of engagement.
Which brings us to the ecosystem scale. The text uses an old-growth forest to demonstrate how self-organization governs entire biospheres.
In a forest ecosystem, you have tens of thousands of different species. They are competing, cooperating, consuming each other.
Total chaos, you would think.
Yet over time, a stable, highly resilient equilibrium is achieved. And no single organism directs this.
Right. There is no apex predator holding a summit to determine the population caps for herbivores.
No pine tree is the secretary of photosynthesis.
I love that. And the text specifically references the flow of resources, right?
Yes. We now understand, through the study of mycorrhizal networks, which is often called the Wood Wide Web, that trees actually share water, carbon, and nutrients through underground fungal networks.
It's unbelievable. Like, a birch tree in the sun might transfer excess carbon to a shaded Douglas fir.
But, and this is key, the birch tree isn't performing an act of conscious altruism.
And the fungus isn't acting as a central bank.
Right. The transfer operates purely on the laws of source and sink dynamics, driven by chemical gradients and pressure differentials.
So it's just physics and chemistry again?
Yes. It is a completely decentralized resource allocation system that maintains the health of the entire forest without a central governing body. The balance is dynamically negotiated, second by second, by the interactions of all the participants.
Seeing this principle operate in snowflakes, embryos, and forests is so compelling. But the text makes a critical pivot here, which I think is where it gets really challenging.
It argues that self-organization isn't just a biological or chemical quirk.
Right. It is a universal law that applies to human creations as well.
The realization that complex systems can self-organize has fundamentally altered human disciplines. Economics, computer science, urban planning, sociology, they increasingly rely on network theory and systems thinking.
And the most potent example the source material provides to illustrate human self-organization is language.
Language is the perfect case study. It is arguably the most complex system humans have ever produced, and yet it completely lacks an author.
Yeah, no individual invented English or Mandarin or Arabic.
No committee sat down, drafted the vocabulary, finalized the grammar rules, and distributed textbooks to the population. Language is a decentralized, emergent phenomenon.
Words appear out of necessity. Meanings shift. Entire vocabularies emerge over centuries based purely on usage.
Exactly.
But I'm stuck on this analogy. I really want to push back on the idea that language is entirely decentralized. Because if no one is in charge, why do we have dictionaries?
Right.
Why do we have grammar teachers failing kids for using the wrong verb tense? I mean, France literally has the Académie Française, a government body that tries to dictate what is and isn't official French. That sounds a lot like top-down control to me.
That's a great point, but the distinction you're highlighting is between descriptive and prescriptive grammar. And it actually perfectly reinforces the self-organization model.
Really?
Institutions like the Académie Française or dictionary publishers do not invent the language. They attempt to catalog, standardize, and occasionally police it after the fact.
Okay.
But they almost always fail to control it.
Because slang and new dialects bypass them completely.
Exactly. The mechanism of language evolution relies on the fundamental parameter of mutual comprehension. If you invent a sound that no one else understands, the word dies instantly.
Right.
But if you use a sound that successfully conveys a shared meaning, it gets adopted, repeated, and integrated into the broader network.
That's memetics, right?
Yes, mimetic selection. The law of communication acts as an invisible filter. Order isn't the opposite of spontaneity. Under the right parameters, order is the mathematical inevitability of spontaneity.
Wow. So the dictionary doesn't create the order. The dictionary is merely a snapshot of the spontaneous order that the network of human speakers has already negotiated.
A snapshot of a moving target.
That reframes our entire concept of spontaneity. Like, we are taught to view spontaneity as chaotic, lacking discipline or structure. But the text argues that when the underlying rules are right, spontaneity actually builds the structure.
The implications of that are staggering when applied to the universe as a whole.
Oh, totally.
If ecosystems, languages, and biological forms continuously evolve and organize themselves without a master planner, we have to reconsider the fundamental nature of reality itself.
Is the universe a finished product, like a manufactured object, or is it an ongoing, spontaneous process?
And that question serves as the gateway to the work of philosopher Alfred North Whitehead.
Yes. The source material leans heavily into Whitehead. It argues that he basically dismantled centuries of established Western thought with a concept known as process philosophy.
He essentially argued that reality is a verb, not a noun.
Okay, to appreciate Whitehead's intervention, we have to understand the paradigm he was dismantling, right?
Right. From the ancient Greek atomists all the way through Descartes and Isaac Newton, the dominant worldview was based on what's called substance ontology.
The idea that the universe is made of stuff.
Yes. The universe was viewed as a giant, empty container filled with solid objects, planets, rocks, chairs, bodies, atoms.
Just things.
These objects were considered fundamental, static entities that just occasionally interacted or bumped into one another. Reality was viewed as a collection of nouns.
And Whitehead looked at that and said, you have the architecture completely backward. He argued that reality is not composed of things, it is composed of events, processes, occurrences, becomings.
He suggested that process is far more fundamental than substance. What we interpret as a solid, static object is actually just a temporary stabilization within a much larger flow of becoming.
The analogy often used here is the whirlpool in a river, but I find that a bit naturalistic. Think about a digital screen instead.
Okay, screen.
If you were playing a video game and you look at a character standing still on the screen, your brain perceives a solid object. a noun.
Right, you see Mario.
Exactly. But if you zoom in, there is no solid object. There are millions of individual pixels flashing on and off at 60 frames per second. The object is an illusion created by a continuous rapid-fire process of energy states changing. Stop the process, turn off the power, and the object just vanishes.
That is an incredibly accurate metaphor for how quantum physics understands matter.
Is really?
Yeah. Whitehead was formulating his philosophy right as quantum mechanics was emerging in the early 20th century. Physics was discovering that at the subatomic level, there are no solid billiard ball-like particles.
Quantum field theory essentially proved Whitehead right.
It did. In quantum field theory, an electron is not a tiny sphere of solid matter. It is an excitation, a vibration, a temporary event within an underlying electron field that permeates the universe.
So matter is literally a verb.
A particle is something the field is doing.
So the table I'm sitting at right now isn't a static object. It is a highly stable recurring event.
The universe is not a finished product. It is a continuous act of creation. Stars are born, burn through their nuclear fuel, and collapse. Tectonic plates shift. Biological forms continuously mutate and adapt. Reality is relentlessly dynamic. Absolutely nothing is exempt from change.
This brings me to another crucial mention of Joe Bandra, which perfectly stages what I consider the deepest conceptual shift in this entire text.
Let's hear it.
If you accept Whitehead's premise that everything is an event, a process, a continuous becoming, it forces a radical reevaluation of how we perceive time and creation.
It eradicates the concept of creation as a historical event.
Yes. Here's the deep insight from the text. Perhaps creation is not something that happened. Perhaps creation is something happening, not in the distant past, now.
That completely subverts the traditional mythological and cosmological timelines.
It takes creation out of the history books. Think about it. At this exact millisecond, inside your skull, neurotransmitters are crossing synaptic gaps to form the thoughts you are using to understand my words.
RNA is being transcribed.
The planet is hurtling through space. The sun is converting millions of tons of hydrogen into helium. Your body is not a biological monument that was built decades ago and left to slowly weather away.
No, it is an active construction site.
Exactly. The process never stopped. Creation is current events.
The entire cosmos is an unbroken chain of becoming. And the realization that creation is an ongoing, present-tense reality driven from within the system rather than commanded from the outside, it forces a profound crisis in theology.
It really does. How does humanity define the concept of a creator or the divine in a universe that builds itself?
Well, the source material addresses this philosophical crisis directly. It notes how culturally polarized the debate has become. We are locked into a very rigid binary.
Right. On one side, you have the traditional theist, the believer, who often relies on the watchmaker analogy.
The watchmaker theory, formalized by William Paley, argues that if you find a complex watch on a heath, you must assume a watchmaker designed it.
Which makes sense on a human scale.
Right. By extension, they argue the complex universe requires a cosmic engineer, someone who drafted the blueprints, built the machinery, wound up the clock spring, and either stepped back or occasionally intervenes.
The architect standing outside the building, and on the other side of the binary, you have the skeptic or the atheist,
who looks at the empirical evidence of self-organization, sees that the biological and physical systems require no external architect, and concludes that the watchmaker does not exist.
The universe is just a product of blind, random mechanics.
But the text suggests that this binary, a supernatural engineer versus random, meaningless mechanics, is a false dichotomy.
It introduces a third ontological possibility. What if the creative principle is not separate from creation?
Exactly. What if the source of reality is expressing itself through the process?
In theological terms, this moves the discussion from transcendence, a God outside the universe, to immanence.
The creative intelligence is woven into the fabric of reality itself. It does not manipulate reality like a puppeteer pulling strings. It is reality.
The text points out that this is not a modern scientific invention either. It is a very ancient philosophical perspective found in various mystical traditions.
Yes.
It highlights how the ancient sages of India conceptualized this using the term Sanatana Dharma.
The translation and contextualization of Sanatana Dharma here is critical. Western audiences often mistakenly equate it with Hinduism as a dogmatic religious structure.
But the text clarifies that Sanatana Dharma translates closer to the eternal law or the eternal order, right?
Yes, it is not described as a belief system. You don't sign up for it.
Right. It is presented as a cosmic operating system. It functions entirely independent of human belief, much like the laws of thermodynamics or gravity.
You don't have to pledge allegiance to gravity for an apple to hit the ground.
Exactly. Gravity doesn't require human psychological validation to operate. The text argues that the underlying creative principle of the universe functions in exactly the same way. It is the fundamental law of reality relentlessly expressing itself.
This framing removes the anthropomorphic traits usually assigned to the divine. There is no cosmic personality judging, debating, or micromanaging.
There is a quote from the source here that I think brilliantly captures this autonomy. Stars do not consult theologians before shining. Planets do not seek philosophical approval before orbiting. Atoms do not read scientific journals before obeying physical laws.
The universe operates with total sovereignty.
It is incredibly liberating. Reality simply is. It doesn't pause its expansion to see who is winning the ideological debate on social media between fundamentalists and atheists.
The tectonic plates still drift,
The ecosystem still balances itself. The mathematical laws remain unbroken.
and that unbroken continuity, that elegant self-expression, is precisely what drives the greatest scientific minds, not toward arrogance, but toward profound humility.
Because when physicists probe the quantum vacuum or when astronomers map the cosmic microwave background, they do not find chaotic random noise.
No, they find staggering, mathematically precise coherence.
The text is very careful with its vocabulary here, though. It uses the word intelligence to describe this coherence, but it immediately clarifies. Not necessarily personal intelligence, not necessarily impersonal intelligence, simply an extraordinary order underlying everything.
But observing that structural intelligence forces the ultimate inquiry.
We have established that the universe is self-organizing. We see the patterns.
But the inescapable question remains.
Why does this order exist in the first place? Where do the laws of physics actually come from? Why is there an underlying coherence instead of absolute boiling chaos?
The source text acknowledges that this is where human epistemology hits a hard limit. It sequences our methods of inquiry perfectly.
How does it lay them out?
Well, science excels at describing the laws. It maps the how. Philosophy questions the implications of the laws. Mysticism contemplates the origin of the laws.
But none of these disciplines possess a definitive, verifiable answer to the origin of the order itself. They all eventually stand before the exact same void of mystery.
And emerging from that mystery is a specific puzzle that the text highlights, one that I think is the most conceptually difficult part of this entire discussion.
The puzzle of mathematics.
Yes. The Nobel Prize-winning physicist Eugene Wigner famously published a paper on this exact dilemma. He titled it, "The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics in the Natural Sciences."
Unreasonable is the perfect word for it. Let's break down the friction here. Mathematics, in its purest form, is a system of abstract symbols, logic, and rules developed entirely inside the human brain.
We invent mathematical concepts, like imaginary numbers or non-Euclidean geometry, often just as intellectual exercises, with no immediate application to the physical world.
Right. Mathematicians develop these frameworks purely through internal cognitive logic.
Yet, decades or centuries later, a physicist studying the fundamental structure of the universe will find that those exact, abstract, human-invented mathematical concepts perfectly describe the physical behavior of reality.
It's spooky. Like when Albert Einstein was developing general relativity, he realized he needed a mathematical framework to describe curved space-time.
And what did he find?
He found that Bernhard Riemann, a mathematician, had already invented Riemannian geometry decades earlier, purely as an abstract concept. Why does the abstract logic generated inside the human mind map so flawlessly onto the physical structure of the cosmos?
It suggests a terrifyingly deep symmetry. Another profound example is Paul Dirac.
Tell us about Dirac.
So in 1928, Dirac was writing equations to describe the behavior of electrons using both quantum mechanics and special relativity.
Okay.
And his equation resulted in a mathematical quirk. It had two solutions, one positive and one negative.
Like when a square root gives you a plus and minus.
Exactly like that. Most people would just throw away the negative solution as a weird mathematical artifact.
Yeah.
But instead of dismissing it, Dirac trusted the math and predicted the existence of an entirely new kind of matter-antimatter.
And years later, experimental physicists actually discovered the positron.
He found a physical particle hidden inside human math.
How is that possible? The inner workings of human logic are perfectly synchronized with the outer workings of the universe.
It's wild.
If the universe is just random, blind mechanics, human math should not be able to predict the existence of unseen atomic particles or black holes just by rearranging equations on a chalkboard.
The effectiveness of mathematics implies that the human mind and the physical universe are not separate entities operating under different rules. They are expressions of the exact same underlying architecture. The logic of the universe is the logic of the mind.
We have covered an immense amount of theoretical ground today. We started by examining our own cognitive blind spots, the human blueprint bias, driven by our evolutionary need to detect agency and our conditioning in hierarchical societies.
We saw how this bias blinds us to the reality of self-organization, where nature builds breathtaking complexity from the molecular geometry of snowflakes to the morphogen gradients of human embryos to the resource networks of forests entirely from within.
We then applied that to human systems, seeing how language organizes itself mimetically without a central designer.
And we moved through Whitehead's process philosophy, dismantling the idea of a universe made of static objects and replacing it with a quantum reality of continuous events.
We realized that creation was not a historical event, but a current, ongoing process happening at this very millisecond. We explored how this redefines the divine, moving past the watchmaker binary into an understanding of an inherent cosmic order akin to Sanatan Dharma.
And finally, we confronted the ultimate mystery of why this self-organizing universe is so perfectly intelligible through human mathematics.
That summary actually provides the foundation for a final implication I want to leave you, the listener, with today.
I think I know where you're going with this.
We have established that the universe is a continuous self-organizing process. We have also established that there is an unreasonable, almost impossible correlation between human cognition mathematics and the physical cosmos.
The internal maps the external.
Exactly. If we accept that we are not biological accidents inserted into the universe from the outside, but rather emergent properties grown out of the universe, then human consciousness itself is an event of self-organization.
It is the universe organizing its own matter into a state of self-awareness.
The anthropic perspective.
So, when we look at Paul Dirac or Albert Einstein writing equations on a blackboard to understand the life cycle of a star or the nature of a particle, it is not merely a human being trying to understand nature.
It is literally the universe, having evolved a human brain and a human hand, utilizing the language of mathematics to finally understand itself.
The profound intelligence woven into existence had organized itself into you, specifically so that it can look back at its own beauty and comprehend its own architecture.
You aren't just observing the deep dive of reality. You are the deep dive.
You are the universe looking at itself. That fundamentally changes what it means to be alive.
It really does. Thank you all for joining us on this exploration today. We hope these concepts have challenged your inherited narratives and pushed you to examine the mechanics of your own reality.
Keep investigating. Keep questioning.
Keep exploring the extraordinary, ongoing mystery of existence. And the next time you see a ripple in the sand, or a snowflake falling, or a word shifting its meaning, perhaps you won't need to look for the invisible architect.
You can simply marvel at the elegance of a system endlessly composing itself.
Until next time.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might benefit from the conversation. Your support helps us continue exploring the deepest questions of life, consciousness, and reality. I am Julia Carter, and it is my honor to introduce Joe Bandra, author, philosopher, speaker, healthcare technology pioneer, and lifelong explorer of life's questions. Through his writing, Joe bridges science, philosophy, psychology, spirituality, and direct experience in a search for truth. His first book, Finding Nevaeh, is a transformative journey of self-discovery and the search for lasting happiness. His second book, Body, Mind, and Machine, chronicles his remarkable career and the evolution of healthcare technology. His next book, The Nature of Reality, explores consciousness, existence, and the mysteries at the heart of human experience. Joe's work invites us to look beyond what we think we know and awaken to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the universe we inhabit.
Life often feels like an endless list of tasks, constant noise and distractions, pulling us in every direction. We're all searching for happiness, but what if we've been looking in the wrong places all along?
This was Nevaeh's journey. Lost in the noise, she felt cut off from the peace and happiness she longed for. Until she met Joe Bandra, an unconventional, insightful philosopher with a different perspective. Jay, as he is simply known, didn't hand her a map. He gave her something far more valuable, a compass, a way to turn inward, navigate her own thoughts, and uncover the clarity hidden beneath the chaos.
Readers around the world have been touched and inspired by finding Nevaeh.
Your journey to inner peace begins now. Get your copy of Finding Nevaeh, available on Amazon and at findingnevaeh.org, or listen to the audiobook on Audible, Spotify, Apple, and other platforms.